Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, I got a bunch of us together with another author, and very excited to have him on. I've seen him on other shows, and I think he has some really impressive, deep shit to talk about. And I think something very interesting about this man is he started at a young age. Very lucky, in my opinion. But before we get to him, we will introduce some of the other rejects. Lisa, the Occult Reject Mad Scientist. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me. Hello, fellow rejects, and very excited to hear what Aleksander is going to be talking about today. Just wanted to plug the occultresearchinstitute.org and check us out on rejects have contributed to that in literary form. So check us out on occultresearchinstitute.org.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Would you like to let anybody know a contact in case they would like to get in touch with you or how the podcast get in touch with you?
Sure. Twitter, Solis Lisa.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Jin the Ninja, what is going on, sir?
What is up, boss? Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's been a little while, but I'm always excited to podcast with you guys. And hello to Lisa, Bennett, Tyrone, and Aleksander. Of course, I want to plug our episode just dropped on Chant It Down, which I'm pretty proud of, to be honest, because I think we sounded like super tight and cohesive and like we're spitting the same message. Magic's real. If you want to check me out, you can on Twitter, Wukong Reborn, WKONG Reborn, or the show account at Threshold Saints, which is also the same for IG. I'm calling it this week. We're calling it Terminally Online Occult Audio E-Zine. So conversations on metamagic, basically. So if you're interested in that, check me out. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And definitely keep an eye out for, he's got another episode dropping with Toby Chapel. For the people who aren't scared, check that one out. Thank you very much, Jen. And we got Bennett joining us today again. What is going on, sir? It's always a pleasure to have you.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on. Hello, other rejects. And you can check out my podcast, Broadcasting Seeds, at all the normal places, YouTube and all the audio players that are out there, and then also at broadcastingseeds.com, and that's probably the best place to get a hold of me as well, or on Instagram. Probably do the most on Instagram. So
well, thank you very much, man, and I always appreciate you joining us. And last but not least, we got Tyrone. What is going on, my man?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? So what's up, Alex, man? It's been a minute since we talked. Definitely excited to talk to you again. Of course, we talked on my show before on your book. I love your book. Great book. Always recommend everybody to get it. Thanks, man. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Everything that you can find me on is on my website, rebirthoftheword.com. Thanks for having me on, Nick, because Alex is, man, he's
highly
awesome,
recommend.
Bro.
I can highly recommend.
Thank you. Thank you, Tyrone. And finally, to the man himself, Aleksander, please. I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. So I guess let everybody know.
Don't worry.
Let everybody know what you're doing
Czeszkiewicz.
and what you're about and where they can find your book.
My book in English is available on Amazon. It's Deja Vu, has everything already been, and I think if you just copy paste my name and surname, you will find it on most of the Amazons like US, Canada, Australia, and many others. So Deja Vu has everything already been, and you can find me on many social media. Just as I mentioned, copy paste my name and surname, and you will for sure find me.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Aleksander. And first, I would also like to thank Mike and Dave, especially Dave. He helped put us together, so that's what's up. Appreciate that, sir. One of the things, I guess, before we even kind of get into your stuff, not to, I guess, to get too personal with you right away, but I do know from the things I have read, you kind of got into this at a young age, like around, I think it said 17. It's a great number. How did that, I'm just going to be honest, how does that happen? Like, was it influence from family, friends, schools, something on like TV? How does somebody get into the esoteric or even stuff like Atlantis, correct? At age 17? How did that happen? I mean,
Yes, I would say it was heavily influenced not maybe by school itself, but by study, not only for school, but also for plenty of competitions. And at one point during my middle high school, I was at the point that there were problems with choosing high school because of the governmental reforms of some kind, it was much harder than before to go to a good high school. So in order to be safe, I went on many competitions, including historical one, and it was the historical one that led me to all of this research, and then, as you mentioned, writing my book at the age of 17. So I wrote it at 17, then I needed to wait until 18 years old to published it then at 18 in Poland, and then the next year at 19 I translated it myself into English. So this was the journey, and it started because for that kind of competition I needed to learn, I would say, all of the history. Maybe of course not all, I don't want to brag, but I would say the whole picture of how our history is accepted by academia. So from all the, even before history, prehistory, hominids, all the evolution up until, let's say, our species, then through cavemen into first settlements, then first cities, civilizations, and so on up until modern times. And I think that because of that I acquired this holistic picture, I started questioning things. Is it really all we know about our history? Why it couldn't turn out to be a different way? How do we know that everything was just as it is portrayed in textbooks and academic books and so on? So I started digging deeper and deeper. First, as I mentioned, from, let's say, a materialistic point of view, I was very heavily into science, all kinds of science, from biology, physics, of course, also into history and stuff like that. And then at some point I went even beyond the materialistic part, the materialistic science, and went into alternative history, and then into spirituality and everything that is non-physical. And I would say that, you know, it was a very fun now looking at it, because I would say that I have two parallel paths going on at the same time. When I started this research, at one point I was so invested into research. I was reading books, you know, like crazy. These are all real, and I have plenty of more in my room and read throughout these years. And at one point, this was like two paths, and these were all together like during one point in my life. And I was heavily researching. I would say this was the masculine part, like heavily research and, you know, get this knowledge. And at the same time, I would say I had spiritual awakening or something like that, because before that I would say I was maybe an atheist or agnostic, something in this kind. Not heavy dog, no, there is nothing beyond physical and something, no, but a little bit skeptical. And I would say that parallel to the research stuff, I started having like, this was the masculine part, the research, and the feminine part was all the internal things and, you know, plenty of spiritual experiences, dreams that came to be a little bit prophetic and stuff like that. So yeah, it was a cool experience. As I mentioned, it was somewhere between, I would say, 15, 16, maybe 14. It started at 14 years old, and it led to me writing my book. And, you know, it isn't just, you know, a book written by a 17-year-old. No, it's like 450 pages in English and about 400 in Polish, in my, of course, native language. And here I see Tyrone showing this book too. And yes, it led me to all of this, and I continue this journey heavily, and going into more and more discoveries about not only the history, as I started with history, but also about the entire universe, and maybe even beyond, of course, the physical boundaries of the universe.
What, I guess maybe to go forward, the easiest way to go. Well, first off, well, obviously, I mean, I'm assuming you're from Poland.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So yeah, because I was just getting an idea of, like, you know, you had to do these studies for a certain thing. Yeah, I'm just wondering, probably a little different than what the United States would expect you to do. I guess going forward, when you started doing this, when you were studying this stuff for whatever reason, was there like a moment where you thought, not like so much of an aha moment, but I guess, or maybe an aha moment, something that convinced you, was like, wait, there's something weird here, or something didn't seem to add up, or things seemed like different than what you thought, that got you into writing this book, I guess?
I think maybe it was not of this kind as you described it, but I would say it was a little bit me coming from just being a casual guy, child at this moment, like 14, 15, I was still a child, I need to say that. So I had a really open mind. And when, I needed to learn this, I was passionate about learning and reading all of this, but I was from, just being, it's a little bit childish thought, but I think we need it in all areas of our life to just be, childlike, to have childlike curiosity and, think, oh, maybe just thinking, what if our ancient past didn't turn out to be this way, just as they described? How do we know that, everything that is described in these textbooks, like, oh, these were the first settlements, these were the first civilizations, is true? What if it is not true? How do we know about all of this? How do we know that this version of the history is true? At the same time, just a side note, I was also into philosophy of science, methodology, so I can later speak about all of that because it's very, very complex and very, very misunderstood nowadays. But I would say it was a childlike curiosity and, thinking, oh, just asking, simple questions. What if ancient Sumer wasn't the first? Or what if this kind of settlements weren't the first? Or, oh, I learned at biology that genetically speaking, anatomically modern humans existed for about 200,000 years at that time, but nowadays even it is taken back 400,000 years. So I was just asking questions. Why first civilization started 5,000 years ago? And here we've got 200 or more thousand years of anatomically modern humans. So what was going on there during all of this, like 95% of the timeline of our species? Is it lost or we were just primitive? I was just asking these questions and trying to search. And when there weren't any answers in the sources or in the academia, I started searching. I've seen, okay, but most of our ancient ancestors, whether famous Plato's Atlantis or whether ancient Egyptians, ancient Sumerians, ancient Indians, all of these first civilizations, like I mentioned, thought that they weren't the first or that they were much older. So maybe some of the answers to my questions of what if it is all much older, what if it wasn't like that, may lie in these ancient texts. And that's how I went first into the root of those alternative text sources that are very often omitted because they are mythical or folklore and stuff, and legendary, of course. And then from that, I also went into metaphysics, spirituality, and so on. So I wouldn't say it was like a aha moment that something isn't right, but more just it started from a curiosity. What if it isn't like that? And how do you all who wrote these textbooks and how you all who are proponents of these theories know that these are true? But what if not? What if there was a previous civilization? What if there is something new? That's why I actually started my book not from a historical analysis, but from looking at a modern civilization and how quickly would it decay if there was some kind of a catastrophe or if just humanity was wiped out and everything was left abandoned. I started with that, just, with normal, questions and trying to find the answers. And when I tried to find the answers, I found out that the entire story may be completely different than it is portrayed in the official mainstream narrative.
What was it that brought you to Atlantis? Was that Plato?
I think what brought me into Atlantis, and I think it wasn't initial Plato, was this question, what if there was something before these first civilizations? And I would say that the first one, because prior to that I was very heavily interested in DNA, genetics, biology, the first thing was this, at least 200,000 years of anatomically modern humans. I've seen some theories that, okay, maybe it's a little bit less, a little bit more, but genetically, almost the same species as today. Of course, everything is changing constantly. Even our bodies are changing throughout the generations, from each, person, from each father to each son. However, I thought that, genetically almost the same. And also this thing that led to the beginning of our species was also, I would say, a miracle, because it was so improbable to occur that, how did it occur? So this was the first, and then I started searching the sources, not initially Plato's Atlantis, but I was starting searching the sources. I thought to myself that, ancient ancestors, whether from Egypt, Sumer, or other civilizations, were much closer to those prehistoric times that we are today. So maybe they knew something that we nowadays do not know. And I thought to myself, okay, everything is decaying, so maybe plenty of stuff were lost. And then, apart from sources from these first civilizations, like the mythical kings list from Egypt and the famous Sumerian ones, then I came into Plato and his tale of Atlantis that was at that time completely, I would say, forgotten, because this trend of lost civilizations, I wouldn't say was popular in Poland at that time. And I was like, okay, there is something more and more going on. And I was searching and searching for other sources of lost civilizations, just like Atlantis, like famous Mu, Lemuria, or either some local folklore about that there was something before that, or a folklore concerning cataclysmic events like the Great Flood. And that's how it initially started.
So, does anybody have any questions for him before I
Sure, I'll ask a quick question. I caught you, Alexander, on IG. I was really impressed because this is something that we play with, especially from Nick's influence on the show, is that like a lot of what is described in these older ancient texts are actually experiences of consciousness or maybe magical experiences. And you kind of said that a similar thing, at least like ideas that exactly we don't have to hold on to the Wewas Kang mythologies, and we can just forge our own sort of like experiences with the same text.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes,
would you say, sorry, Alexander, I
No,
apologize.
no. Yes, continue.
I just meant that how would you describe what you believe?
What I believe. I would say from the beginnings, from all of my personal experiences and my research that I mentioned, I would say that there is something, of course, beyond the physical realm. Maybe I don't know what is exactly that, but I deeply believe that there is something beyond the physical realm. And I think that our consciousness, or consciousness is just like a modern trendy name, something in us, some people may call it soul, spirit, maybe there is a whole science to describing these particular things inside us. I think that there is something beyond physical in us that may survive our death or maybe before our life. I do not say that, everything about reincarnation and stuff like that is true, but I think that there is something beyond us, and I think that it manifests here in physical realm. And I also did a little bit of research about how, events, how history can be actually aligned and can be a manifestation of something above the physical realm, and how just by calculating, for instance, the cycles of time and cycles in history, we can show that, okay, there is something more than just randomness as portrayed by biology and modern scientism, that, okay, we are just, and materialism, of course, that we are just biological machines. So I do not believe in that. I wouldn't say I'm of a particular faith. I do not support a particular faith, but I think that there are some golden nuggets in plenty of religions or spiritual beliefs. And I think that there is something above us, like some kind of source, universe, God, whatever you may call it.
So, Alexander, I've been wondering, because I've been looking into stuff like Adam's calendar and stuff like that. What sites or artifacts are like, how do you say it? Like a smoking gun that mainstream archaeology refuses to acknowledge, in your opinion?
I would say that the biggest smoking gun is Göbekli Tepe, but it is commonly accepted to be like from a very, very prehistoric period of at least 12,000 years ago. But why for me is a smoking gun? Because it completely shattered the old, not maybe paradigm, but old opinions on history. Because when theories of Atlantis or previous civilizations were like in the 70s, 50s, or 80s of the previous century, I found that the biggest skepticism of them from mainstream archaeology and history was, these things cannot be, let's say, 10,000 years old or more, because we know from historical records that humans were not capable of creating such megalithic things back then. But then, at the end of 90s of the previous century, we found Göbekli Tepe, and I think it was the smokiest gun, because now it is all shattered. You cannot just deny any theory of, let's say, pre-Ice Age or Ice Age civilizations, because you just do not have any evidence. Okay, also lack of evidence isn't the evidence for absence. That's another thing. But this was a common argument back then, but now this argument is lost. We see that there were builders at Göbekli Tepe, so people 12,000 years ago or even more, because there are more things to the Göbekli Tepe side still buried beneath, and maybe older than what we have, than the dates that we have now. And I think that now, if you just say, oh, this may be from 10,000 years ago or 12,000 years ago, and maybe you are still speculating, you cannot say, oh, it cannot be because humans were not capable of that, because we have an example of Göbekli Tepe that they were. But I would say but I think this is the biggest smoking gun. I would say that another clue to this question and to go in this route of Göbekli Tepe, and the biggest thing would be the megalithic architecture of the biggest polygonal huge blocks that can be found in plenty of the places on the entire earth, like the famous Sacsayhuaman in Peru and many sites, because it's not only in Cusco, Sacsayhuaman in Peru that we find these polygonal walls, but also similar walls can be found on Easter Island, which is of course nearby Peru, so maybe someone traveled there. But then you have Europe, in Italy, in Greece, and then you have in Egypt, for instance, the Osirion is very similar, maybe not with that many angles like the polygonal walls of Cusco. However, for instance, the fundamental blocks of the third pyramid of Giza, the Menkaure one, is also very, very similar, and you can point to at least a few similarities, because you may be a skeptic that, okay, huge blocks, people were using them because, they were the best for building biggest buildings, and maybe, they cut them similarly. They didn't want, to cut them all very exactly, so they left these polygonal walls. But you may say that, okay, they're similar in structure in this megalithic polygonal maze, but also they have a special knobs that are going out of them, probably for, let's say, some kind of ropes to be attached to it, to pull them, maybe, I don't know. But these attachments, these knobs, can be seen very, very similar ones in, again, South America, in Egypt, in, of course, Europe, but also in far, far east in Asia. There are plenty of similar megaliths in China, in Japan, and probably a few other countries. So I think this would be the other smoking gun. But I would say also the smoking gun was the first thing that I mentioned, that we now take the roots of anatomically modern humans back in time. So what we were doing before the first civilizations, if the first civilizations appeared, let's say about 7, let's say plus or minus 1,000 years ago, and we see 200,000, 400,000 or even more years back of anatomically modern humans. So what? We were making no progress. We were just cavemen for hundreds of thousands of years. Even let's assume that we were cavemen for all this time. Probably somewhere on Earth there appeared at least small culture, a city, or some kind of thing like Atlantis. With all of the humanity, all of these years, probably there appeared something. And I think that's the biggest smoking gun, because it denies logically the lack of, let's say, that, because skeptics say, no, Atlantis was not there for sure, it's all mythical, it's all false. But we see that it is more likely for something like Atlantis or like some kind of city, culture, civilization to appear like 30 or more even 1,000 years ago than not. So I think that this genetic thing is another big smoking gun.
So I don't want to co-opt everything, but like you run in and you talk about forbidden knowledge, right? Being suppressed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I always like asking this question. So who do you believe is doing the suppressing? And also to what end?
Oh, great question. I love that. And I think, let's say first I think people who have knowledge and are keeping in the dark people who do not have this knowledge or have just glimpses of it. And I would say this is still my conspiracy theory of the entire history. I do not say that it is true at all, but I think that everything points out that something similar is happening. I think that a group of people, of course not some reptilians, maybe yes, but maybe not, some group of people who have knowledge about this non-physical things. Let's say some people would say they have knowledge of how to remember everything before incarnating here on Earth. For example, I would say, I do not accept it as a truth, but for example, and I think that throughout the history we see this trend that from the beginnings, I think, and it is similarly described in plenty of ancient texts, people in the very distant past were more in tune, in harmony, we would say, with the entire surrounding reality. We would say that they were much more, in modern spiritual terms, much more psychic that we are nowadays. They were having plenty of more of these psychic capabilities. They were much more open. They were much more in tune with everything. And I would say, and this mentioned in plenty of ancient texts, and plenty of the oldest ancient texts, even in Mahabharata, for instance, that there are different ages. And each age is of less and less and less spirituality. In Mahabharata, from Mahabharata, it stems the famous concept of yugas, of these ages of time, 4 ages. So from the great Satya or Krita Yuga, the golden age when Dharma, so what is right, and all of these spirituality, psychic capabilities are 100%. Then it comes 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, and then we end up in Kali Yuga, which is the worst, the material age of only 1/4 quarter of the Dharma. Similar beliefs can be found, for instance, in Native Americans, who mention the cycles of time as a cow who is standing on 4 legs. And each age, this cow, or buffalo, I think, loses 1 leg. 1 leg, 1 leg, and then if it has 1 leg, it's very easy for it to collapse, or it collapses. And I think it describes everything, and I think that it is neutral, that there are different ages. In ones we have more heightened psychic capabilities, in others we do not. I think it's natural, it's nothing wrong, and there isn't conspiracy here. But I think that where the conspiracy is with all, we would say, secret societies. From the very, very beginnings, even the illusions, or then the Hermetists, and then Rosicrucians, and so on. And I wouldn't say all of them are bad, no. But I think that some people who had this knowledge would say knowledge of initiation, because if we, for instance, I was also researching ancient initiations like Manly Palmer Holstaff, ancient Egyptian rituals, and so on, and I would say that the common denominator, so the common thing that is in many of them, would be the out-of-body experience, near-death experience, some kind of experience that provides the person experiencing it with this aha moment that there is much more than physical body, that there is something more, something higher. This is, I would say, the basics of the secret knowledge. And I think that this secret knowledge was hidden from humanity. And secret societies, maybe not all, of course, but some people in the secret societies were hiding this knowledge. We see it, for instance, in Hermetists, who are saying, okay, we are doing that because we would be persecuted, and all of this knowledge would be lost if we weren't hiding it. So maybe there was some kind of good idea behind it. I do not deny it, but I think that some people, in all areas of our lives, there are idiots, cowards, or people who want to have the power and, rule other people, narcissists, and so on. And I think that such people, hijack this knowledge, hid from other people for their safety, just as nowadays similar mechanism is being done in the modern world, that for our safety we'll do that, and our freedom is limited. I don't want to go into this part, but I think there is a similar mechanism to that. And I think it's going that, in the past people were much more attuned. We even see it, plenty of psychologists were analyzing ancient Greek and Roman texts, and they found out that people from these times were much more into being tuned into the surrounding reality of theirs. So they're thinking, okay, different energies, for instance, in ancient Greece, different energies or beings or spirits are at the temple, different spirits are at the bay, at the beach, different spirits are in forest. They were really in tune, and people say, oh, they were hallucinating or something, but maybe they were feeling everything of it. And I think that with all the ages from the ancient times, that's why I think the Dark Ages were the peak of the Kali Yuga, in my opinion. Maybe it's different way, but I think that the Middle Ages were the peak of Kali Yuga, peak of darkness, of non-spirituality. And I think that then, from then on, because you see, people were initially attuned to spirituality, then they were losing their abilities. Then, because you see it from history, religions came in. Let's say from the shamanistic, spiritual, not religions, but spiritual beliefs, then came religious beliefs, dogmatic beliefs that, oh, we know the truth, this is like that, so heaven, hell, and so on. And then the next step from the religions would be the Enlightenment, all the science, materialism, and I think now we are being hijacked into the materialism, that nothing except for matter exists, that we are just biological machines. And I think, this manipulation goes on and on and on from the times that we were very in tune with nature, shamanistic beliefs, and many other beliefs that were non-dogmatic, then into dogmatic religions, because people were still more attuned into, let's say, the spiritual things. And then we are being cut off spirituality more and more. And, maybe this is some evil, I do not know, cabal plan to hijack humanity into this material realm. So that's my little, I do not say it's true, but that's from all my research, from all my experience, and it's a lot of research, I would say. This is my holistic view. If I would say there is some kind of conspiracy going on, I would say that this is the broad view of the conspiracy theory of the entire history. Here in Polish, we have even spiskowa teoria dziejów, we call it so. The conspiracy theory of all ages. We call people like that who are into conspiracy theories that, oh, you and your conspiracy theory, we have still it in our Polish language, like the name for it. So it's really, really funny.
Something I wanted to ask you, going by some of the things you said, like, in my opinion, I'm just wondering, for people, like you were saying, were we always dumb for that long? I'm just going to put it in those words. And some of the things you said makes me think that maybe you believe in magic in a sense. And if I look at magical experiences from my experience, I would think that it could be quite possible that a dumb person can start getting pretty intelligent if they have these experiences regardless. I don't know how their brains were back then. I don't know if they had the capabilities, but just wasn't using it, blah, blah, blah. I know that shit was different, but I do wonder if even somebody that was that ignorant or a caveman, if they were to have a magical experience and cross the abyss and come into contact with God or the all, is it going to start getting ideas that is available to anything and start bringing that back with them? And that's how you start to become a little bit more intelligent.
Mm-hmm. Yes, actually, it is going mainstream. It is called, I think, the Stoned Ape Theory. It was initially called that, how we evolved from, let's say, apes, broadly speaking, from hominids, or from apes into hominids first, then into humans, because hominids were also, let's say, more intelligent, more capable than the other apes we know. It was probably, and it is a theory, and it is going into mainstream science, but it's still one of the many theories how we evolved, that, magic mushrooms or some other psychedelic substance was taken by, let's say, monkey. It had spiritual visions. Maybe they started eating it more and more, and it led to, changes in their brains into more intelligent, and so on and so on. And I think it's a very good idea, and probably how at some point it happened. Maybe it wasn't the only factor, but maybe that was one of the factors how we started to be different than other species, and how our previous, let's say, ancestor species like other hominids started to be different than just, let's say, apes.
Awesome.
You're also going to get hit in your head really hard and become really smart too. There's a lot of people that have that happen to them, and we talked about that before, Alexander. And we also talked about savant syndrome too.
Yes, it may be. I think that we have much many capabilities when it comes both to our. Won't say only brain, because I would say the entire nervous system, let's say, or even genetic stuff. I think that there is much more hidden, and I'm a proponent of going and not limiting ourselves when it comes to our potential. And Savant syndrome, as you mentioned, Tyrone, is one of the best examples that you are just, let's say, casual by many terms human being, and then you're hit and now you're a genius. And there are plenty of cases like that. It is even studied extensively by scientists. It isn't some woo-woo like maybe it was before. And I think it shows us that there is much more to ourselves, and maybe there are some kind of internal beliefs, internal blockades that may be connected, for instance, to our own self-portrait, or maybe even our upbringing, that are limiting us and we do not even know it. And maybe you're being hit by the rock, and now all of this like subconscious locks are being opened. And the same, for instance, during out-of-body experiences, during maybe hypnotic regressions and plenty of other experiences, they may cause and they may unlock all of these locks that are subconscious. And I think even going through the ages, there may be some kind of these locks being implanted to some extent in us, like religions ones that are limiting ourselves, and many others that may still be there. And maybe to some extent it's intentional, maybe it is random, I don't know, but I think that there is much more to our brains and our capabilities.
Alexander, I had a quick question. Have you looked into any of the brain development after primates evolved into hominids, when we stopped being frugivores and went into meat-eating capabilities, I guess you could say, where our diet was basically more meat and fat than it was carbohydrates?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's, I think, the most accepted theory that how we evolved, but it wasn't the initial revolution. I think it was a little bit later in our development that we were already some kind of divided from the apes, I would say. And let's say we were a little bit more advanced apes. We started eating, as you mentioned, meat, more fat, so probably more energy, because, from casual, we will see it very clearly from how much food, like, for instance, rabbits eat, how much hay, because how much energy it needs, or how much leaves particular vegetarian animals eat. It's this meat and this fat, as you mentioned, was a huge leap forward. And I think that to some extent, yes, it is right that it was some of the factors that led to our brain development. But I would say that there were probably many others, and it was just one point, how the capacity of the brains was increasing, but not always capacity of the brains equals higher intelligence. It may be only intelligent at one point.
I guess the angle that I was looking at is that the moment that we started to eat flesh was that we reduced the gut length, as you do see in these frugivores as well as herbivores. And so it was kind of like a trade-off to where gut basically shrunk, so to speak. We were no longer fermenters, hindgut fermenters or forceps, whatever. But then our amygdala and our prefrontal cortex basically increased, which is the site for memory, cognition, and what have you, and nervous system, as well as being an extension of the brain. But also, when you do speak to people who have these meditative, mystical experiences, they have gone through a period of fasting. And if you, most of the diet that is considered fasting is withdrawing of carbohydrates. So if we left frugivore villa and we are no longer consuming a carbohydrate-rich diet, but now a protein, fat diet, leaving us in ketosis, so to speak, that we would be able to have a more, or at least it'd be easier to have a mystical experience because you have now suspended yourself from the carbohydrate-rich diet. I was just wondering. or
Let's
read in
start. I would
that.
give a little bit lecture on the anthropology and of this evolution, but let's start with ketosis. I would say I was on keto for about 2 years, maybe 1.5, and I would say that it wasn't a better experience than eating carbohydrates. I think that it wasn't a better living, better training, and so on. There were a few benefits, but I would say yes that during ketosis I was having more like maybe not entire visions, but more like trance state. It was more often like this state before we sometimes dream before we go to sleep. So I would say like that, but I do not think that ketosis is the key. But what else I would say, how it all evolved. It wasn't only that, prefrontal cortex and everything evolved because we started eating meat. It was not initial. It was the first we started eating meat, and it was not only much more energy in it, but also much less time was needed to get the energy. Because you see, for instance,
Correct.
koalas, they need all day long and probably all night long. They are eating, and plenty of herbivores are eating all the time, or a large amount of the daytime is spent into eating. But now you hunt it once, and you could even live a few days, a week, I don't know, depending on the amount of food. So it was also this development of our intelligence was also because of the free time. We have energy, we have free time, so we started thinking. Like, imagine going out of this, let's say, survival state. Now you have, let's say, all day long, you are not hungry, so you think, oh, let's go here, let's say, from a primitive level. And that's how everything evolved, and that's how we started the way of life that we lived then and live now, the hunter-gatherer one. And that's was the initial one, how the culture, the art started, all of this cave paintings and so on. So it wasn't only about the meat and not only about the nutrients. Nutrients were important, but it was also about the conclusion of that we have plenty of free time, so we can, explore more than just, eating leaves all day long. And that's how we then adapted, because, we do not need to be like monkeys, like here to climb the trees, because we are not getting the food from the trees. We are going into hunting, and most of the prey is on the ground. So we go, and that's how we start having better posture that we now have, and so on. So it wasn't only about the meat and the stuff like that. And I do not think that ketosis is the thing, at least from my experience into, but I think that these states, because it's not only about ketosis or fasting. Let's say I fasted for a lot too, but I think it's about our bodies and how they are behaving in conditions that are not good for our survival, because there are even practices, and I think that even ancient practices were like that people were put into a place with no lights, with no food, with no everything, they were hidden in a cave or something and closed for, so let's say, a few days, maybe even in some cases. And I think that then they experienced such, psychic states, spiritual experiences. And I think even 10 years ago or 5 years ago, it was very popular. At least there was a brief trend of that, going into retreats, being hid in a place with zero light for 3 to 5 days. Of course, with some camera, and they check if you are not dying there, of course, so they can help you survive. But, I think that these conditions, and I think in these conditions, I don't know, maybe our biological body shuts down, or plenty of the things I mentioned shuts down those keys in our subconscious, those locks, and so on, and all of the, let's say, primal behaviors for our survival, these shut off. Maybe they think, oh, you're dying, bye-bye, biology doesn't need you, we'll take another species to reproduce. And then you may have a much bigger access to this spiritual internal self, and maybe partially, I do not deny spiritual experiences, but maybe partially there is something going on with psychedelic substances in your brain. We have DMT found in a few places in our body, not only in the brain, but also heavily in lungs. And I think that during such states that, oh, your body thinks you are dying, it may, create, just as we are dreaming. Some of the dreams may be spiritual. I experienced plenty of out of body, I would say, dreams that couldn't be explained by just physical material terms, but I also think some of the dreams are just basically biological ones of our brains. So I think that, during these times of intense fasting, not eating, or being in the dark for many, many hours, many, many days, I think our body may have some mechanisms that may help us survive. Okay, we will give you all of this trance stuff in your brain, you will see it, and maybe you will come alive. Maybe you will have meaning again, because very often with such states, people have new meaning in life. So maybe partially, I do not deny, I think there is something more than just biological things when it comes to mystical, spiritual experiences and stuff like that. But I think that some of lighter spiritual experiences, or just, hypnosis states and stuff like that, may be connected just to a biological mechanism, defensive mechanism. Okay, he's dying. He didn't eat, he haven't eaten anything in 3 days. There is dark, there is nothing, no any light, and so on. So maybe let's give him spiritual experiences, so we will drive him, make him motivated to pursue the survival, because maybe, I think just from biological terms, maybe this person doesn't want to live, let's say. So maybe this will enable this person to have the motivation to then continue on living, and he will survive, because biology is very, very often about, or mostly often about, survival. So I think there may be some mechanisms like that.
I had 2 quick points. One thing is to sort of riff off what Lisa said about the sort of pre-evolved, we'll say, form. And Alexander will know this because he brought up some things of the Rig Veda. But the idea of humans being closer to yakshas, or nature spirits, or like who have big feet, pot bellies, lambodarea, bigger heads, very close to the earth. They're earth spirits, really. And so that's what I kind of thought when you were speaking, Lisa, about how maybe that was the primordial sort of form, you could say, and then we very literally arose from that. And it's not necessarily Darwinian evolution, but maybe it is psycho-spiritual, bio-spiritual as well. And so, Alexander, I also agree with you that the Kali Yuga was way, way overextended. And I think that has a lot to do with the later Theosophists in the 17th and 18th century. I think they didn't understand the sort of Sanskrit math, where the Kalpas and the Yugas are actually much more relative to time, and also exactly, you get it, and so they're also shorter, so much shorter. It's not millions of years. It's maybe hundreds, maybe it's dependent. It depends, but I agree with you. I think it's much more axial.
Yes, if you want, I can continue on this, you guys, because you have a great point that there are like not millions of years or even hundreds of millions of years in some cases. And I think it's like from modern new age stuff, the karmic cycles, that they are on the bigger scale and on a smaller scale. I think that the yugas are the same. And even in the Mahabharata, which is one of the longest and at the same time oldest of the known texts to humanity, there is a mention that there are, for instance, there is only division into 2, divine and human years. So ones are these long ones, and ones are a little bit shorter, but still not like during our known periods of history. But I think it's fractal. That, all of these cycles are mirrored, reflected on plenty of other scales. So we may say, oh, there is a large Maha Yuga, as it is called, Maha, so the great, the biggest one, on the millions or billions of years scale. But, it goes on a smaller and smaller scale, just like, we have entire universe, we have, let's say, galaxies. In the galaxies we have solar system. In the solar system we have our Earth. On our Earth we have like atoms, and so on and so on. I think it's fractal, and we see fractals everywhere in nature, in cosmos, and so on. And I think the same is with yoga. So maybe there are even yogas that are, let's say, minutes or seconds long. We do not know. Maybe even these yugas do not apply to us. But I think that the yugas are on all levels of existence, just as, let's say, on the level of, we can compare it to like space to time, on the level, let's say, of the entire galaxy, on the level of the solar system, of the level on the planet, which is similar to solar system. We have the moon, which is also surrounding us, and then on the level, let's say, of an atom or something, and maybe plenty of the other levels in between them. And I think I am a proponent of a division of the yugas when it comes to our history, especially of Sri Yukteswar, who was the teacher of the famous Paramahansa Yogananda, this autobiography of the yogi. And he actually got this yuga cycle, scaled it into precession of the equinoxes. And I am heavily writing in my books and heavily research the precession of the equinoxes, and I think that the precession of the equinoxes may be the key to some kind of reincarnation or something, at least when it comes to repeating history. And I will ask myself, okay, if history repeats according to this astronomical cycle, it isn't man-made fictional cycle, this is astronomical cycle that we see, that you can observe, let's say, physically and independent of any kinds of beliefs and stuff. And if we can, or if this precession of the equinox cycle, these cycles are governing history, so maybe there is something beyond that. Maybe this is some kind of a cosmic clock that tells what is happening on Earth. I'm heavily explaining that into my book, and I think that, that's why I'm proponent of this division of the yugas. And in this division of the yugas, the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages actually would be the worst ages when it comes to, let's say, our known history from the ancient times up until nowadays. Dark Ages would be the Kali Yuga, and then, let's say, Antiquity would be, I think, the Dvapara Yuga, and now we are also in Dvapara Yuga from the times of the Enlightenment. And that's why I'm a proponent of this kind of division, because it fits with my research on the cyclical history connected with this cosmic clock, astronomical cosmic clock, the precession of the equinoxes. And this precession of the equinoxes can be found in plenty of ancient myths, legends. I think most of our listeners heard of Graham Hancock and so on. Plenty of people like Graham Hancock explain that in plenty of the most ancient myths, there are references to this exactly precession of the equinoxes stuff. And I even connect the astronomy of the precession of the equinoxes with, let's say, our Western zodiac system of 12 or sometimes 13. It would also apply signs of the zodiac with these yugas of Sri Yukteswar that fit into the one full cycle of the precession of the equinox, which is about 26,000 years, or to be exact, 25,920. And why I'm so exact? Because you have 25,920 years, and if you divide it into zodiac signs or into yuga, you have exact numbers that can be found in the dimensions of the Great Pyramid of Giza, even in the dimensions or the lengths and distances from, let's say, sun to earth, earth to moon, moon to sun. So even physical bodies, these numbers are everywhere, and I think this is, I would say, the code of the matrix. Matrix saying the material world, because if history repeats according to these numbers of the precession of the equinoxes, and if we see these numbers not only in time, let's say, of the repeating history, but also in the distances in our solar system, or in the proportions, let's say, of Earth and Moon and Sun, so the three key bodies when it comes to our existence, I think there is something going on, and I think it's both in space, both in time, and that's what I'm searching for. I will be honest, I'm searching for this code of the matrix, because I see these numbers are there. So maybe, if we crack the code of the matrix, it's like I would compare it. I don't say that everything is like a video game, but I would compare it to the video game. If we crack this code and put it, let's say, into some kind of computer engine or something, it would simulate the entire solar system or our place of living and everything. So I think this is the code of the matrix, and I think that's it.
Did anybody have any questions or say anything on that before I kind of
I'll comment really quick, Alexander. I thought that was great. And I thought it's so interesting. I always think of, because Nick talks about how he got into podcasting through David Icke, like listening to him like as an OG. And so I think like when you're talking about cosmic time, well, that's very Saturn moon matrix, right? Because Saturn is really cosmic time, and then the moon is really the time that's contained in our minds, what we can measure through our own perceptions. So it's really interesting that you say that, and I agree that the Yogananda, although himself not a tantric, his mother was actually what we would call a Sri Vidya tantric. She wasn't necessarily a tantric, but their family understood some of the Sri Vidya texts. Now, this kind of axial idea is not necessarily Vedic or Puranic, but it is tantric. So I often wonder if this like dark age period, this Kali Yuga, the true Kali Yuga time, if that was like to reforge these sort of lost ideas or maybe refound ideas and then propel them, like you're saying. That's why I think it's so much more compelling to view it as sort of a progressive axis of history. Like things are always moving. It's like always a cycle rather than staying fixed in place.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Hey,
Yes,
Alex, I was
okay.
going to say, hey, explain to them what you believe a civilization is, because, I always say, everybody has their own definition and meaning of what a civilization is and what criteria is needed to be considered a civilization. So give them an idea of what you consider
Yes,
what
I
a
remember
civilization.
that question. I think last year or something. Yes, I would say that according to our norms of modern, let's say, science, society, logic, and so on, society would need like some structure when it comes to people living it, and it couldn't be like one family or something. And another key denominator of the civilization is like some kind of writing, some kind of script, and that's how history actually think this civilization needs a script. But I would say from now going beyond that and beyond everything, I wouldn't consider that civilization needs a script, because let's say, like hypothetically speaking, what if civilization is so psychic that it doesn't need to write down anything? Just as even coming back to Mahabharata, which is one of the longest and oldest epics, there are plenty of psychic abilities described them. I mentioned it in my book. There is a blind person seeing psychically the entire battlefield from miles and miles away. And I wouldn't say, I think from our own materialistic point of view, civilization would need script or some kind of writing system, but I would say that it doesn't need, because maybe it can communicate in other forms. Maybe some kind of other civilization would even communicate even differently than psychically, and so on. But of course, as I mentioned, there needs to be a script according to scientists. There needs to be some kind of structure. Some would say hierarchy, but at least some kind of structure. And yes, this structure actually was the biggest thing, because before there was structure, and without structure there couldn't be that progress into civilization. Because imagine everyone, all the families, even living in a community and not, let's say, sharing the roles that everyone needs. There is no blacksmith, let's say, there is no farmer, etc. Everyone is doing everything, and there is no communication between them, no hierarchy, no structure. In that state you cannot move that forward. But it is hypothetical, of course, but scientists, are very fond of this idea that because of the structure, that, okay, you'll go farming with these people, will be blacksmith here, you will be doing that, you will be taking care of the family. Because of the structure, it could grow and grow and grow because of these roles.
I was going to say add to that, it almost reminds me of how when I was growing up, I'm 41 years old now, and I could remember 10 to 20 phone numbers with no problem, right? Like just every friend of mine that I had, I could remember their phone numbers. But now, I can probably remember only maybe not even one, maybe,
But you know what? Plato said that more than 2000 years ago in one of his, I do not remember which one, texts, dialogues. He mentions this, that when the god of wisdom, Thoth, came to Egypt, and when he introduced the hieroglyphic script, all the memory was lost because everything could be written down and there was no need to memory. So Plato, more than 2000 years ago, described what you are talking about.
Look at what AI is doing to people right now, Grok and
Yes.
ChatGPT. You know, a lot of people will go to ChatGPT and Grok for a quick answer, which is nothing wrong with it if you know the basics, right? You can weed out, you know, where ChatGPT, you know, got its information from. But a lot of people before ChatGPT, they would just go to Google. And what would people do? Click on maybe the first 5 links, maybe the first 2, because it's always on the top. So they think.
And compare the information themselves.
Yeah. And, you know, it takes away. And then you have some people who say, oh, you know, and I'm a very big advocate on books too. I like to read just like you. You know, we talked about that in the past. And just because I read something in a book doesn't mean it's accurate or right. It's just that person's giving me an idea in their book. You know, they had somebody believed in them, or they published their book, and boom. And people take that as, oh, see, that's evidence, which that's not always true, because I've read 3 different versions of the Mahabharata. It's funny that you mentioned that. And 3 different, I was able to go back and see the difference in between the 3 of them. And it's just interesting that you can find that throughout any text, even the Sumerians. A lot of people believe that the Sumerians did one thing. And like you said, you know, a lot of people believe civilization started because, you know, some kind of writing or some kind of place where people had to work together and stuff like that. And, you know, I know Margaret Mead, she was an anthropologist. And she said the beginning, and we talked about this too, that she believed the beginning of a civilization started because of a healed femur. Somebody took time out of somebody else's life to take care of somebody that had a broken femur. And usually in that time frame, I think it was about 15,000 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, that that person be left to die. But you can see in every animal world around us, there are different animals that help other animals all the time with different things. So, and then, you know, the idea of what ants are considered one of the most sophisticated civilizations out there, the way they have their workers and, you know, hierarchy and structures and so on and so forth. They just don't have the technology. And that's why I was asking about, you know, what was your criteria of a civilization? Because there's different ideas and different theories on that, and everybody has their own, you know, way to, you know, spin it for their narrative or whatnot. You know, but, you know, there's obviously something that was before us. There's written records of it. And as long as the beginning of writing has ever came to be, that was a way to record our history. Sometimes it would be exaggerated, sometimes it wouldn't. But what is always consistent, and I like consistency, is that there was something that was known before a higher civilization that we know of, what is normally said through archaeologists and so on and so forth.
Yes, I totally agree with you. That's the same thing with me that I see. Even if you dig deeper, you will see that sometimes the footnotes are wrong, or maybe there is a footnote to something and you get the book, get the footnote, and you see that there isn't anything about that in this other book. So, you know, even you cannot trust the books, but especially the AI, I'm not using for the research purposes AI, maybe only give me some new videos or new information, new sources just to check out. So maybe I use in that way, but I couldn't be using, like, even if you ask, like, let's tell from Mahabharata something, no, it would give you probably false answers in most of the cases. So not only for, let's say, maybe technical, not imported things, like I want to upload a video to YouTube, what to do or something like that, or a little bit more advanced, of course, but not for the research purposes. There were many instances in which AI, ChatGPT or others were even inventing the books or the articles, like scientific articles that were not there, that were not existing even. So yes, that's the state of AI.
If you don't, does anybody have any more questions before I switch over to something else?
I just wanted to make a quick statement. You had mentioned about cosmic time, and it got me thinking about the Tesseract. And the Tesseract is considered an 8-cell, or I guess like a cube prism. And then 8-cell got me thinking about the embryo when it reaches the 8-cell stage. The 8-cell stage is very well known, especially with IVF. It exhibits the most successful stage at which an embryo develops for embryo transfer and implantation. It is also said that when an embryo reaches the 8-cell stage, whether implanting or not, its almost guaranteed to continue on is much higher, because that is the point at which all the DNA that is contained within the embryo is beginning to be transcribed. So when you say that you're looking for the code to the matrix, it reminded me of the 8-cell stage starting to transcribe all the information that is available. So that's all. I just wanted to make that statement.
Yes, there's a magic in numbers, in correlations between numbers. That's why I think numerology is important, not maybe in the sense that it is portrayed, let's say, on the internet, but especially in looking for, let's say, even sources, because numerology is one of the oldest sciences, because logy science, of course. So yes, there are plenty of things when it comes to numbers, geometry, and more.
Lisa, did you mention an 8?
Yeah, 8-cell stage. It's when the embryo has divided into 8 cells within the zona pellucida. And it happens on day 3, which is funny. If you divide 8 bisects, it's 3s mirroring each other, looking at each other.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. I was gonna go over, I guess, kind of switch over to something different, only because I think you talk about it in your book, and I know everybody's kind of got an idea and a theory of it. You have, I guess, you have a different idea of what the pyramids might have been used for, correct? I don't know if you want
Yes,
to get into that.
that's a great question. And I'm actually in my book comparing plenty of theories, and I'm still thinking that there are many theories, but the more I compare these theories of the pyramids, the more coherences between them I see, that maybe both of the theories are right, and that the purpose of the pyramids was connected with that. And I see that even maybe the mainstream thing that, oh, the pyramids were tombs of the pharaohs, is to some extent true. That all the alternative theories and mainstream theories may be true, that there is a similar purpose to that, and everyone is touching a part of the same thing. And scientists say, oh, it were the tombs, others say, oh, it were the electric power plants, others say, oh, it was something spiritual. And I think that they are to some extent all right. And in my book, I heavily show plenty of experiments with the energy of the pyramids, energetic properties, both physical and some kind of spiritual, non-physical energetic properties. And I would say that they were connected to death to some extent. I think that they were connected to soul, some kind of journey to the soul, but I wouldn't say that they were especially tombs, and I wouldn't say that they were only power plants and so on. No, I think that the purpose of the pyramids was some kind of either initiation or ascension, some kind of spiritual transformation. And even when we see the shafts from the, let's say, Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, shafts pointing at the famous Orion, or other shaft pointing at Sirius, we see that these stars were very, very important to even the lore of, let's say, ancient Egyptian. Whether we accept that ancient Egyptians built the pyramids or not, we see that ancient Egyptians and a few Native Americans were telling us that at the Orion there was some kind of gate for the soul or for the spirit to come, like, let's go off this material realm. Maybe it's some kind of bad thing, maybe the Orion one is a bad, like, negative or something, but there were a few belief systems that I found that mentioned that, okay, these where the shafts of the pyramid point may be connected to the journey of the soul. But I do not think that it was like just for dead body, for dead people. I think that it was more for some kind of mystical experiences, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences. And I would go back into this conspiracy theory about the initiation. And especially, I think Manly Palmer Hall, from his famous The Secret Teachings of All Ages, mentions that such things as this coffin, this box, granite box in the pyramid that is unfinished, such things were very often used to what I mentioned about initiation, near-death experience, that the person was like a dead man put into the coffin. The lid was being closed, and in the Pyramid of Giza there is no lid, of course. However, there is like a huge block cut from this box, and I think that it may be, I think Manly Palmer Hall even mentioned that probably it was for the person to breathe, because it couldn't be without air, because this man will die, for instance. But I think that yes, it was used for initiation. People were close in these coffins, and Manly Palmer Hall at least provided plenty of other examples of coffins or caves that were closed, and there was no, let's say, light there. And as I mentioned, during no light conditions, there are plenty of hallucinations or maybe spiritual experiences too. So I think that these were used to do that, and I think that the energetic properties of the pyramid, because there are a few both on the physical level and both on non-physical level, I think that these were just to amplify the result, just as for instance acoustics in special temples are even by science. Science admits that these acoustics in special temples, I think it was in Malta or somewhere, also in a few other places, that these were done in order for people inside of this temple to maybe not have exactly altered states of consciousness, but maybe to be a little bit more harmonized. Like it was a little bit different experience than just normal living. So I think that the pyramids were used for something like initiation, some would say ascension, some kind of non-physical effects. And I think that the energetic properties just were there to amplify them, just as temples are created in such a way to amplify, let's say, also maybe a little bit less mystical experiences that anyone, if we go into like great temples, ancient temples, we'll see that there is something strange going on. So I think it was all to amplify this, to have much more accessible spiritual mystical experience, but not for people who are already dead and non-living.
I find it interesting that you mentioned something about you thought it was associated with death, and you also thought it might have been mystical experiences. Do you think that's part of it? You think,
Yes.
like, I would say, like, the shamans, in my opinion, they're pushing you to the edge of death. Do you think
Yes,
you
yes,
think
of
having that
course.
experience is actually part of a magic?
Near-death experience would be much stronger than just, let's say, hallucination or something. So yes, I think it is putting, maybe not, I think it depends on place, and probably some people used near-death experience, some may use out-of-body or other mystical experience. I think that both are correct.
I had wondered, because when you kind of mentioned that with the pyramids, I mean, my idea about the pyramids have changed so much since then, since I've had this idea. But and who knows? I do think it could be multifaceted, like you're saying. It could be doing multiple
Yes.
things. I have always thought, though, for a long time, that it was kind of amplifying, like shooting your soul out of your body. Like,
Exactly, to some extent what I mentioned, yes. So
okay, I was
through
wondering
this
if maybe we're
chance,
going on with the same thing.
yes, yes.
All right.
Maybe some other conspiracy theories is for harvesting soul energy, who knows? Putting some people inside of the Great Pyramid, maybe near-death experiences and getting this energy, who knows? Also, the Great Pyramid is a model of the northern hemisphere of the Earth, and that's why it resonates with the Earth. So in physics, if we have, let's say, a big ball and a small ball that have similar properties, let's say they're out of metal and they're the same shape and size and proportions, but one is bigger, one is smaller, and if we, let's say, put one into vibration, the other one would be amplified to vibrate too. So this is this phenomenon with the Great Pyramid, that it does it too, to some extent, of course, not maybe like in the example I mentioned. So who knows what was the exact purpose.
Well, thank you. I appreciate some of your opinions and ideas on that. Anybody want to ask him anything? Have something to say? No? All right. What? You ready to say something, Lisa, before I go?
Yeah, I keep seeing her mic go
I
off.
know.
was
I'm
gonna say
sorry. I'm
something.
just no, just that when you talk about the pyramids and Orion, I'm pretty sure you said this, but it's interesting how they already knew. Well, I think they did. That it was the birthplace of stars. That it was the birthplace. The nebula was the birthplace of the stars and that you see that being, I guess, repeated throughout all of the ancient civilizations, in whatever they left, that it was revered by regardless of where on the planet these civilizations were.
Yes, there are strange connections between plenty of isolated cultures, both not only by space, let's say America and Egypt, but also by time. Some people from 3,000 years before current era, some people 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago. So yes, there are plenty of different similarities that are crazy, and in my opinion, I analyze them very deeply, are beyond just mere coincidences and just, similar achievements of our ancestors. No, there is something deeper going on.
Have you gotten any kind of I guess critiques or bad reviews from like academics on your book, or have you had like anybody say that they didn't agree with your stuff?
Yes, probably, and even myself, maybe not after the critique, but at some point, and I still do that, I very extensively read critiques of similar theories, like debunkings of some alternative theories and stuff like that, and I learned that always you do not need to be very heavily invested, or invested is a bad word because you need to research to be invested, but I would say never be attached to any theory. Never be, oh, I know everything. No, you cannot be like that. And yes, so I'm heavily reading criticism. I received some of the criticism, maybe not a lot, from the academics and from people who say like that. But I think recently, last year or last 2 years, appeared this channel, the Dan King Dan. I think most of us know about him, Dan the Dunker, or yes.
Yeah.
So I think he popularized this, that not all debunkings are actually debunkings, and that you can debunk them, that debunk the debunking, and it's a cool idea. And I see that, yes, in plenty of the cases those debunkings are not debunkings at all, and plenty of people believe in them. Sometimes, yes, they point to some flaws in theories or even total mistakes, but it's a different thing than just completely disproving the theory. Just because you see a few holes doesn't mean that everything is completely wrong, and I see some opinions in debunkings like that. And that's why I also very often say that I speculate, I theorize, I do not know if it is true, because how can I be so sure about something? I can defend the theory. This is like the old school, oh, I will defend this theory with all the things, but why defending it so badly when at the end it will turn out to be, let's say, 80% or 70% wrong? The better route is to just speculate, admit that you are speculating, theorizing, and my own idea is not to show, oh, Atlantis was real and others are, fools that they do not believe in it. No. I am saying that there are many more possibilities, both to our history, both to our universe, both to ourselves and to plenty other areas of our lives, that there is much more, and you need to go out of the schematics, out of your, let's say, belief systems, out of your paradigms, dogmas, and so on, and just see everything. And I'm a little bit a critic of science. I'm not totally anti-science, but I see also flaws, just as scientists see flaws in alternative theories. I see flaws in science. So I think that's the best way. Everyone is giving each other feedback, but always be the most open-minded. For instance, if I right now want to, let's say I know nothing, I just am here sitting. If I wanted to know anything, let's say I want to gather information about the reality that is around me, I wouldn't assume anything. Maybe that, oh, okay, I see it, so this exists, probably. But I wouldn't assume, oh, okay, only black is real, white isn't real, or only these colors are real. And this is to some extent what science is telling us, with its base in fundamentals, with assumptions like materialism, naturalism, so there is nothing supernatural and only matter exists, and so on and so on. These are limiting stuff. These are, like, I would say, different sunglasses. If I see the world as it is right now, but if I put the sunglasses, it wouldn't have all the colors, let's say, that there are. So my vision, my description of the world would be limited. The same is with science, and the same is with people who have strong beliefs about things that are not 100% true. Maybe there are some basics that are true, but if you aren't 100% sure, you have to still, I would say, be a student of life, not to be a master. I know everything, and it's like I say, no, just be student again. Okay, I'm still learning. Maybe it's like that. I have some knowledge, I admit, but the more I learn, the more I see how many things are there that I do not know.
Well said, sir. Thank you very much. Another thing I did want to ask you, maybe we could kind of talk about this a little bit and maybe start to wrap it up unless anybody else has any other questions and stuff. I know you're working on another project, or I guess like a book, correct?
Plenty of projects, plenty.
I don't know if there was anything you maybe wanted to plug or kind of talk about a little bit, like, give a little bit of a teaser.
Oh, I am right now. I haven't uploaded for a long time on my YouTube channel. However, I will come back. I came back recently in my Polish channel, so now I will come back to my English content, so videos and so on. Maybe not this year, but later I want second and other books. But right now I was publishing books here in Polish and doing Polish stuff. But I also have a project with historian Michael Leflem, a YouTube channel called Atlantis Bros. And then we mostly talk about Atlantis related stuff, but again, it is one of the current projects. But I just, go with the flow and just, do things when they feels right. So probably plenty of projects incoming. I don't have any idea what to tell you now.
Okay. All right. Did you want to let anybody know where they can find, like, find your stuff, any sites or anything that you want to plug? I know you're on
Yes,
Instagram.
I think that the best way is just to copy paste my name and surname. Whether you want my book, it's on Amazon. Deja Vu has everything already been in English. Only on Amazon is the version in English. Polish one is on other sites. And either on Facebook, either on YouTube, if you find Aleksander Czeszkiewicz, it's me. There is another Aleksander Czeszkiewicz, so just copy Instagram, Facebook, I think TikTok, YouTube. Probably will find first my Polish ones, but the second one would be my English one because my Polish media are greater. And then you will find all the links. Whenever you will find me, Facebook, YouTube, on the place you find me first, you will have all the links attached to my books. I have a website too, Czeszkiewicz-Global.com, and I think that's the easiest way.
Awesome. Well, after the show, if you want, you can send me whatever links and I'll attach those.
Okay, I'll send
notes.
you.
Thank you very much for coming on. Before we wrap it up, I will have the other rejects get a chance to plug themselves again. Lisa, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us. That was great. I like the stuff that you added. I appreciate it. Would you like to plug anything or say anything? Let people know where they can find you.
Sure. Alexander, thank you so much for your presentation. Very enlightening, eye-opening, and so many nuggets to leap
you.
from and dive into. So thank you for that. And fellow rejects, thank you. It's always a pleasure to have discussions with you guys also. The only thing I'd like to plug is occultresearchinstitute.org. You can find us there. And if you'd like to reach out to me, my Twitter is Solis Lisa. So that's it. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Jin the Ninja, what's going on? Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Alexander. Really great, honestly. I don't always agree with guests as much. Nick knows this because he gets the texts afterwards, but usually it's harder for me to suspend my disbelief, but I have to say, like 99%, I'm there with you.
Wow,
I think
great,
so.
thank you.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's great that you're kind of breaking that husk, we could say, like of the people's belief in sort of these like ancient alien technologies, whatever you want to call it. But it's kind of saying like, yeah, these are theurgic tools. And I agree. That's what I think the pyramids are as well as the mounds, as well as all of it. It's magic technology, magic architecture.
Yes.
Oh, and you can find me at Threshold Saints. I want to shout out my episode with Matt Murrah, who will also be on the show tomorrow. But I just released an episode with Matt, who is a young Kabbalist and also a member of the Grey Lodge. And he also runs our Grey Lodge YouTube channel. So we are doing Friday Night Gnostic Mass this Friday, live on X if you're interested. Speculative Gnosticism. We're just doing a free range roundtable on Friday, but usually we do a series. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. Bennett, Tyrone, amazing. Lisa, thank you, of course, and Nick.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, definitely check out the Kabbalah series. I think we have, I don't know if we'll go live tomorrow, but I think the first part might be up live. But yeah, we're going to be adding Matt to it as well. So it should be really interesting. So definitely check that out in the future. And we got Bennett. What is going on, sir?
Awesome. Alex, thanks. Got a whole list of notes to go research myself. Yeah, just great stuff. And of course, the rejects. It's always a pleasure. Check me out at broadcastingseeds.com. And if you are in the Susquehanna, Pennsylvania realm, Saturday, come by and see me at the Central PA Cryptid and Bigfoot Festival. I'll have a booth, so
That's
just
awesome.
come say hi.
Oh, that's crazy. You got a booth too?
Yeah,
That's what's up, man. Good for
I'm all
you.
fancy.
Nice. That's awesome. And we got Tyrone. Let him know what's up, Tyrone.
Hey, Alexander, always a great discussion and hearing what you say, man. Like I said, I've always said it, man. I recommend his book, man. I got it tabbed up, of course, but I love his book. I've read it already 3 times. I'll probably read it one more time before this year is over with. And a lot of the stuff that he says in there, I can see a lot of what I like to do also. I had a lot of questions and, trying to figure out what is what and stuff like that, trying to, just get to the bottom of the barrel of the information and stuff. But everything that you can find on me is on my website, rebirthoftheword.com. I created a Rumble account. I'm about to start putting my documentaries on there. So I was going to do filming today, but I had to postpone it because I heard Alexander was going to be on today. So I was like, nah, I can't miss out on this. So I'm going to start my documentary, and that's going to be start being on my Rumble. So just look at Rebirth of the Word on Rumble and you'll be able to find it. I'm start loading it up probably next month or so. I appreciate it, Nick.
Oh, thank you. And again, Alexander, that's what's up, man. That was a really great show. A lot of stuff. Again, very impressed, especially with your age. And I like how, I guess, you kind of looked into history and some of the older thinkers and philosophers and even saw how you came across stuff that way. I think that's rather impressive. It's kind of like what I've been doing myself lately, is trying to look at some of the people that really influenced thinking and see what they were really saying back then. And a lot of them all seem to be alchemists or occultists in a sense, or that's how I would look at them today.
Even the biggest scientists,
Yeah.
those who should be the biggest materialists were not proponents of materialism at all.
Yeah. Very interesting stuff. So it was impressive to hear you doing the same thing at such a young age. And again, thank you for the chat. That is what's up. There's a lot of awesome stuff said in there, and everybody was there from the beginning to the end. Thank you. I appreciate it. That's why we go live. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.